pursuit gained slightly on them, and a sound of intense breathing became audible. Dr. Bird paused and turned and faced the oncoming horror. His electric torch revealed nothing, but he listened for a moment and then threw his second grenade. Keenly, he watched its flight. It flew through the air for 30 yards and then struck an invisible obstruction and bounded toward the ground. Before it struck, the downward motion ceased and it rose in the air. As it rose, it burst with a sharp report, and a wild scream of pain filled the cavern with a deafening roar. The doctor fled again after his companions. By the time he overtook them, the entrance of the cave loomed before them. With sobs of relief, they burst out into the open. The guards sprang forward with raised rifles, but Dr. Bird waved them back. "There's nothing after us, men," he panted. "We got chased a little way, but I tossed our pursuer a handful of phosphorus, and it must have burned his fingers a little, judging from the racket he made. At any rate, it stopped the pursuit." The major hurried up. "Did you see it, Doctor?" he asked. "No, I didn't. No one has ever seen it or anything like it. I heard it, and from its voice, I think it has a bad cold. At least it sounded worse, so I gave it a little white phosphorus to make a poultice for its throat, but I didn't get a glimpse of it." "For God's sake, Doctor, what is it?" "I can't tell you yet, Major. So far I can tell it is something new to science, and I'm not sure just what it looks like. However, I hope to be able to show it to you shortly. Is there a telegraph office here?" "No, but we have a signal corps detachment with us, and they have a portable radio set, which will put us in touch with the Army net." "Good. Can you place a tent at my disposal?" "Certainly, Doctor." "All right, I'll go there, and I would appreciate it if you would send the radio operator to me. I want to send a message to the Bureau of Standards to forward me some apparatus which I need." "I'll attend to it, Doctor. Have you any special advice to give me about the guarding?" "Yes. Have you, or can you get any livestock?" "Livestock? Yes, cattle preferred, although hogs or sheep will do in a pinch. Sheep will do quite well." "I'll see what I can do, Doctor." "Get them by all means, if it is possible to do so. Don't worry about paying for them. Secret Service funds are not subject to the same audit that Army funds get. If you can locate them, drive a couple of cattle or half a dozen sheep well into the cave and tether them there. If you don't get them, have your sentries posted well away from the cave mouth, and if any disturbance occurs during the night, tell them to break and run. I hope it won't come out, but I can't tell." A herd of cattle was soon located, and 2 of the beasts driven into the cave. 2 hours later, a series of horrible screams and bellowings were heard in the cave. Following their orders, the sentries abandoned their posts and scattered, but the noise came no nearer the mouth. In a few minutes, silence again reigned. "I hope that will be all that will be needed for a couple of days," said the doctor to the commanding officer. "But you had better have a couple more cattle driven in the morning. We want to keep the brute well fed. Is there a tank stationed at Fort Thomas?" "No, there isn't." "Then radio Washington that I want the fastest 3-man tank that the Army has sent here at once. Don't bother with military channels. Radio direct to the adjutant general, quoting the Secretary of the Treasury as authority. Tell him that it's a rush matter, and sign the message, Bird, if you are afraid of getting your tail twisted." Twice more before the apparatus which the doctor had ordered from Washington arrived, cattle were driven into depths of the cave, and twice were the screams and bellowings from the cave repeated. Each time searching parties found the cattle gone in the morning. A week after the doctor's arrival, a special train came up carrying 4 mechanics from the Bureau of Standards, together with a dozen huge packing cases. Under the direction of the doctor, the cases were unpacked and the apparatus put together. Before substance. The light produced was concentrated by a series of parabolic reflectors directed against a large quartz prism, and thence through a lens which was designed to throw a slight divergent beam. This apparatus, said Dr. Bird. This apparatus, Dr. Bird explained to the Signal Corps officer, who was an interested observer, is one which was designed at the Bureau for the large-scale production of ultraviolet light. There is nothing special about the generator except that it is highly efficient and gives an almost constant electromotive force. The current thus produced is led across these points, which are composed of magnoloy, a development of the Bureau. We found on investigation that a spark gave out a light which was peculiarly rich in ultraviolet rays when it passed between magnesium points. However, such points could not be used for the handling of a steady current because of the lack of durability and ease of fusion, so a mixture of graphite, aluminium, and metallic magnesium were pressed together with a binder which will stand the heat. Thus, we get the triple advantages of ultraviolet light production, durability, and high resistance. The system of reflectors catches all of the light thus produced, except the relatively small portion which goes initially in the right direction and directs it on this quartz prism, where, due to the refractive powers of the prism, the light is broken up into its component parts. The infrared rays and that portion of the spectrum which lies in the visible range, that is, from red to violet inclusive, are absorbed by a black body, leaving only the ultraviolet portion free to send a beam through this quartz lens. I thought that a lens would absorb ultraviolet light, objected the signal officer. A lens made of glass will, but this lens is made of rock crystal, which is readily permeable to ultraviolet. The net result of this apparatus is that we can direct before us, as we move in the tank, a beam of light which is composed solely of ultraviolet portion of the spectrum. In other words, an invisible light. Yes, that is, invisible to the human eye. The effect of this beam of ultraviolet light in the form of severe sunburn would be readily apparent if you exposed your skin to it for any length of time, and the effects on your eyesight of continued gazing would be apt to be disastrous. It could produce a severe ophthalmia and temporary impairment of the vision, somewhat the same symptoms as are observed in snow blindness. I see. May I ask what is the object of the whole thing? Surely, before we can successfully combat this peculiar visitant from another world, it is necessary that we gain some idea of the size and appearance of it. Nothing of the sort has before made its appearance, so as far as the annals of science go, and so I am forced to make some rather wild guesses at the nature of the animal. You are probably aware of the fact that the property of penetration possessed by all waves is a function of their frequency, or perhaps I should say, of their wavelength. Certainly, the longer the rays of visible light will not penetrate as deeply into a given substance as the shorter ultraviolet rays. This visitor is evidently from some unexplored and indeed unknown cavern in the depths of the earth where visible light has never penetrated. Apparently, in this cavern the color of the inhabitants is ultraviolet and hence invisible to us. You are beyond my depth, Doctor. Pardon me. You understand, of course, what color it is. When sunlight, which is a mixture of all colors, from infrared to ultraviolet inclusive, falls on an object, certain rays are reflected and certain others are absorbed. If the red rays are reflected and all others absorbed, the object appears red to our eyes. If all the rays are reflected, the object appears white, and if all are absorbed, it appears black. I understand that. The human eye cannot detect ultraviolet. Suppose then that we have an object, either animate or inanimate, the surface of which say the others were absorbed. Are you familiar with fluorescein? No, I think you are. It is the dye used in making changeable silk. If we fill a glass container with a fluorescein solution and look at it by reflected light, it appears green. If we look at it by transmitted light, that is, light which has traversed the solution, it appears red. In other words, there is a substance which reflects green light, allows a free passage to red light, and absorbs all other light. This creature we are after, if my theory is correct, is composed of a substance which allows free passage to all of the visible light rays, and at the same time reflects ultraviolet light. Do I make this clear? Perfectly. Very well then, my apparatus will project forward a beam of ultraviolet light, which will be in much greater concentration than exists in an incandescent electric light. It is my hope that this light will be reflected by the body of the creature to a sufficient to allow me to make a photograph of it. But won't your lens prevent the ultraviolet light from reaching your blade? An ordinary lens made of optical glass would do so, but I have a camera here equipped with a rock crystal lens, which will allow ultraviolet light to pass through it practically unhindered and with very slight distortion. When I add that, I will have my camera charged with X-ray film, a film which is peculiarly sensitive to the shorter wavelengths. You will see that I will have a fair chance of success. It sounds logical. Would you allow me to accompany you when you make your attempt? I will be glad of your company if you can drive a tank. I want to take Carnes with me, and the tank will only hold 2 besides the driver. I can drive a tractor. In that case, you should master the tricks of tank driving in short order. Get familiar with it, and we'll appoint you as driver. We'll be ready to go in tonight, but I am going to wait a day. Our friend was fed last night, and there's less chance he'll be about. The early part of the next evening was marked by howls and screams coming from the mouth of the cave. As the night wore on, the noises were quite evidently coming nearer, and the sentries watched the cave mouth nervously, ready to bolt and scatter according to their orders at the first alarm. About 2 a.m., the doctor and Carnes climbed into the tank beside Lieutenant Lovingwell, and the machine moved slowly into the cave. A searchlight on the front of the tank lighted the way for them, and, attached to a frame which held it some distance ahead of them, was a luckless sheep. Keep your eye on the mutton, Carnes, cautioned the doctor. As soon as anything happens to it, shut off the searchlight, and let me try to get a picture. As soon as I've made my exposures, I'll tell you, and you can snap it on again. Lieutenant, when the picture is made, turn your tank and make for the entrance to the cave. If we are lucky, we'll get out. Forward the tank crawled, the sheep bleeding and trying to break loose from the bonds which held it. It was impossible to hear much over the roar of the motor, but presently Dr. Bird leaned forward, his eyes shining. I smell musk, he announced. Get ready for action. Even as he spoke, the sheep was suddenly lifted into the air. It gave a final bleat of terror, and then its head was torn from its body. Quick, Carnes, shouted the doctor. The light went out, and Carnes and the lieutenant could hear the slide of the ultraviolet light which Dr. Bird was manipulating open. For 2 or 3 minutes, the doctor worked with his apparatus. All right, he cried suddenly. Lights on, and get out of here. Carnes snapped on the searchlight, and Lieutenant Lovingwell swung the tank around and headed for the cave mouth. For a few feet, their progress was unhindered, and then the tank ceased its forward motion, although the motor still roared and the track slid on the cave floor. Carnes watched with horror as one side of the tank bent slowly in towards him. There was a rending sound, and a portion of the heavy steel fabric was torn away. Dr. Bird bent over something on the floor of the tank. Presently, he straightened up and threw a small object into the darkness. There was a flash of light, and bits of flaming phosphorus flew in every direction. The anchor which held the tank was suddenly loosed, and the machine crawled forward at full speed, while a roaring of an escaping air mingled with a bellowing shriek, burned in the smoke-laden air. "Faster!" cried the doctor as he threw another grenade. Lieutenant Lovingwell got the last bit of speed possible out of the tank, and they reached the cave mouth without further molestation. "I had an idea that our friend wouldn't care to pass through a phosphorus screen," said Dr. Bird with a chuckle as he climbed out of the tank. "He must have been rather severely burned the other day, and once burned is usually twice shy." "Where is Major Brown?" The commanding officer stepped forward. "Drive a couple of cattle into the cave, Major," directed Dr. Bird. "I want to fill that brute up and keep him quiet for a while. I'm going to develop my films." Lieutenant Lovingwell and Carnes peered over the doctor's shoulders as he manipulated his films in a developing bath. Gradually, vague lines and blotches made their appearance on one of the films, but the form was indistinct. Dr. Bird dropped the films in a fixing tank and straightened up. "We have something, gentlemen," he announced, "but I can't tell yet how clear it is. It will take those films 15 minutes to fix, and then we'll know." In a quarter of an hour, he lifted the first film from the tank and held it to the light. The film showed a blank. With an exclamation of disappointment, he lifted a second and third film from the tank. With the same result, he raised the